Have you ever noticed how tired you feel after defending something that didn't even need defending? You say no to a plan because you're exhausted and still feel the need to explain why. You choose a path that feels right for you, and suddenly you're in a courtroom you never agreed to enter. No judge, no jury, just you standing there, trying to prove your piece is valid. We've all been there. That quiet ache of wanting to be understood, the frustration of being misread, and the guilt that follows, as if living differently means you owe the world an apology. But here's the truth no one really says out loud. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Not for your silence, not for your boundaries, not for the moments you choose yourself. I know it sounds simple, but in a culture built on validation, silence feels dangerous. Because silence makes people uncomfortable, and when they can't understand you, they fill the silence with their own stories. She's distant, he's changed. They think they're better than us. You've probably heard it all before. But what if I told you, being misunderstood isn't failure, it's freedom. Because it means you finally stopped living for approval and started living from alignment. In this episode, we're going to explore that freedom, the Stoic way. You'll learn why the urge to explain is so powerful, why it traps your peace, and how to reclaim your calm when people just don't get it. And near the end, I'll share something Marcus Aurelius wrote that changed how I see guilt forever. A single line that will help you walk away from the need to please without walking away from compassion. So take a breath, settle in, because we're not here to fight the world. We're here to master how we face it. We live in an age where everyone is performing understanding. You post something and instantly people react. You make a choice and someone, somewhere, has an opinion. It's exhausting, because no matter how clear you are, someone will still twist your words, still question your motives, still make your peace about them. And what do? We explain, we defend, we shrink, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've become an actor in your own life, playing a version that other people approve of. The Stoics saw this 2,000 years ago. They understood the invisible chain, the one that ties your happiness to how others see you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if someone misunderstands you, let them. 5 words, but they carry the weight of an entire philosophy. It's not arrogance, it's peace, because when you stop chasing validation, you start owning your energy. Here's the shift the Stoics made. They replaced the need to be understood with the desire to understand themselves. They asked, if someone judges me unfairly, does it change who I am? And if the answer was no, they let it go. Not because it didn't hurt, but because they refused to hand over their calm. That's Stoicism in its purest form. Not cold, not detached, but deeply disciplined. A philosophy built on the courage to stay kind without needing to be liked. So imagine this. You walk into a room and people whisper. You feel the familiar tension rise, the urge to explain, to fix their perception. But this time, you don't. You breathe. You remind yourself, their opinion is not my responsibility. And suddenly, the power shifts. You're no longer reacting to noise. You're radiating composure. That's not pride. That's peace. And through practice. Today, we live louder than ever, yet feel more unseen than ever. Every platform tells us to share more, justify more, open up more. And yes, connection is beautiful, but not when it costs you your center. Because every time you explain your piece to someone who's not ready to understand, you abandon the very calm you worked so hard to build. And that's why Stoicism matters right now, in our noisy, restless world. It gives you permission to live quietly powerful, to stay soft but unshakable, to speak less but mean more, to know that your worth doesn't need a witness. So here's what we'll explore together. First, We'll look at why this need to explain runs so deep, how early in life we learned that approval equals safety. Then, we'll walk through what the Stoics actually taught about judgment, how Marcus, Seneca, and Epictetus lived in constant public scrutiny yet remained at peace. And finally, we'll talk about how to apply it, 3 ways to stop explaining yourself without turning cold. 3 daily practices that let you stay kind and firm, even when misunderstood. Because peace doesn't come from being understood. It comes from being aligned with your values, your choices, your truth. And maybe that's what you've been searching for all along. Not validation, but permission to simply be . So stay with me, because in the next part, we'll uncover where this urge to explain really begins, and why understanding it might just be the start of your freedom. You didn't wake up one morning and decide to over-explain yourself. That habit began quietly, long before you even had words for it. Think back. When you were little, you might have spilled a drink or broken something small. Before anyone said a word, you rushed to say, "I didn't mean to." That moment, that instinct to justify, wasn't about guilt. It was about fear. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear that someone's anger could mean you're unworthy of love. And that fear didn't stay in childhood. It grew with you. You learned that being liked meant being explainable. That peace only existed when everyone else approved. So you became good at smoothing edges, at reading the room, at softening your truth so no one would feel uncomfortable. But here's what the Stoics would have told you. Every time you explain yourself to preserve peace, you trade your inner peace for outer harmony. And the cost is high, because once you start convincing others of your worth, you start doubting it yourself. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be content with showing yourself, not explaining yourself." It's a sentence most of us never learned in school, but it might be the one lesson that saves you years of exhaustion. Because think about it. How many times have you apologized for being tired, for saying no, for simply needing quiet? Every explanation is a tiny fracture in your boundaries. And over time, those fractures become habits. Habits that whisper, "My peace isn't valid unless they understand it." But the truth is, your peace doesn't need permission. It never did. It only needs ownership. The courage to hold it, even when others don't get it. So before we move further, take a deep breath with me, in and out. That breath, that pause, is the first moment of freedom. The point where explanation ends and alignment begins. In the next segment, we'll explore how the Stoics turned this awareness into power, why they saw misunderstanding not as a threat, but as proof of integrity. You've probably noticed something. The more you explain yourself, the less people truly listen. Because explanations often don't create understanding. They create noise. You're talking to prove your peace instead of living it. The Stoics saw this long before psychology gave it a name. They understood that most misunderstandings have nothing to do with you. They begin and end in someone else's perception. Epictetus said, "We are disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of them." So when someone misjudges you, it's not your failure. It's just their filter. But here's where it gets deeper. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone misunderstands you, let them." It sounds cold at first, doesn't it? But it isn't. It's liberation. Because he's not saying, "Don't care about people." He's saying, "Don't let their misunderstanding become your burden." That's a radical kind of freedom. The freedom to act with integrity and stop performing sincerity. You do what's right. You stay aligned with your values, and you let time, not words, reveal your truth. The Stoics believed that virtue, the quality of your actions, is its own form of communication. If you live honestly, you don't need to explain your intentions every time. Your consistency will speak for you. And the people who still doubt you, They were never listening in the first place. In today's world, that might sound impossible. We're taught that silence means guilt, that if we don't explain, people will assume the worst. But Stoicism flips that fear upside down. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you've chosen wisdom over impulse. Because think about it. When someone accuses you unfairly, and you rush to defend yourself, what happens? You end up fighting on their terms, in their chaos. But when you stay calm, you change the energy completely. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects their noise back to them. Seneca once said, "A wise man is content with himself." He didn't mean isolation. He meant that inner contentment is armor, soft, invisible, but unbreakable. And that's what we're building here. An armor of calm that no misunderstanding can pierce. So next time someone twists your words, try something the Stoics practiced: stillness before response. Ask yourself, does this misunderstanding change who I am? If the answer is no, walk away with peace, because no explanation can do what your steadiness already has. In the next segment, we'll bring this philosophy into the modern world, where opinions travel faster than truth, and silence has become the most powerful statement you can make. In today's world, the need to explain yourself doesn't just show up in conversation. It's everywhere, online, at work, even in the smallest choices you make. It's built into how society functions. Every post, every message, every gesture seems to ask, do they understand me? You post a photo of nature. Someone asks, rough day. You skip a party. A friend says, are you upset with us? You say no, and people want a reason, a story, a justification. It's subtle, but powerful. We live in an age where privacy looks suspicious and silence looks rude, where explaining isn't just expected, it's demanded. And the more you explain, the more people expect you to. That's why so many of us feel drained without knowing why. Because every unnecessary explanation is energy leaving your system. And energy, once spent, rarely returns. But this isn't a call to stop caring. It's a reminder to care more wisely. Not everyone deserves access to your reasoning. Not every misunderstanding deserves a response. Marcus Aurelius faced constant criticism as emperor. He didn't defend himself every time someone questioned his decisions. He simply acted with integrity, again and again, until even his enemies respected his steadiness. That's the modern equivalent of what we need today. When your coworker misreads your quietness as arrogance, when your friend interprets your distance as rejection, remember, their assumption is their story, not your truth. Your job isn't to rewrite every story someone tells about you. It's to live in a way that makes the truth undeniable, even if it takes time to be seen. And if you're wondering what that looks like in practice, it's in the moments you choose calm instead of correction. When someone says, you've changed, and you simply smile. When someone questions your choices, and you just say, it felt right. No defense, no resentment, just quiet certainty. This is how Stoicism fits perfectly into the modern world, not as an ancient philosophy, but as a living art of emotional conservation. Because peace today isn't about escaping others, it's about staying yourself in front of them. You don't need to vanish from society. You just need to stop giving pieces of yourself away every time someone misunderstands you. And once you do, you'll notice something remarkable. Your relationships begin to change. The people who truly value you stop demanding explanations. They start respecting your silence, because your calm teaches them something words never could. In the next and final segment, we'll talk about what happens inside you when you stop explaining, how your body, your emotions, and your energy finally begin to rest, and how that rest becomes a quiet kind of strength that nothing can shake. There's something that happens inside you when you stop explaining yourself. At first, it feels unfamiliar, almost wrong. You catch yourself wanting to fill the silence, to soften the tension. But then, slowly, you realize nothing bad happens. The world doesn't collapse. People move on, and for the first time, you feel your breath return to its natural rhythm. That's what peace feels like. Not excitement, not victory. Just space. Space between what others think and what you know. Space where your heart no longer races to defend itself. Space where your mind can rest again. When you explain yourself too often, your body lives in a constant state of alert. Your shoulders tighten. Your pulse quickens. Your voice changes tone. You're not speaking. You're surviving. You're trying to prove that you're safe in someone else's perception. But once you stop, your whole system exhales. Your nervous energy turns into quiet confidence. Seneca once wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." And maybe that's what happens when you explain too much. You scatter yourself across too many opinions. Every justification you give is a tiny piece of your energy placed in someone else's hands. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've been living in fragments. The Stoics believed the mind must return to itself, not selfishly, but honestly. They practiced turning inward before reacting outward, not to avoid life, but to anchor in it. So when insult came, they didn't chase it. When judgment came, they didn't fight it. They stayed centered, knowing that control begins where explanation ends. In modern life, that looks like this. When someone questions your decision, you take a breath before replying. You remind yourself, "I know why I chose this." You feel the urge to explain rise, but you let it pass like a wave. And after it fades, you're still standing, calm, intact, and touchable. That's not emotional coolness. That's clarity. It's what happens when you start trusting your own understanding more than the world's approval. You begin to realize that peace doesn't mean silence outside. It means silence inside. And once that happens, you'll feel a shift you can't quite name. You'll move through conversations differently. You'll stop rushing to fill every pause. You'll stop apologizing for existing quietly. You'll stop explaining decisions that were never up for debate. That's the moment you reclaim yourself. Because peace isn't found in being understood. It's found in understanding that you don't need to be Dotso. When you feel the urge to defend your calm, don't. Let them think what they want. Let misunderstanding run its course. You've got nothing to prove, and that's your power. In the next part, we'll take this truth further. How the Stoics turned this inner calm into outer strength, and how you can transform silence into the kind of confidence that reshapes every room you walk into. We spend most of our lives trying to be liked, sometimes without realizing it. We soften our tone so people won't feel uncomfortable. We say yes when we mean no. We share our reasons before anyone even asks. All because we hope that, if they understand us, they won't leave. But here's the paradox. The more you chase approval, the less you belong to yourself. Because every time you adjust your truth for someone else's comfort, you step further away from your own. The Stoics had a name for this: dependence on externals. It's when your peace depends on what you can't control. Opinions, moods, applause. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be free, wish nothing that depends on others." That line cuts deep in a world like ours, where validation is a currency. So let's slow down here. What if you didn't need to be liked to feel worthy? What if you could simply be kind, calm, and consistent, no matter who approves? That's the heart of Stoicism. It's not about shutting people out. It's about keeping your center when the world keeps spinning. And to live that way, you need to understand one thing. Approval is never peace. It's a loan that always needs renewing. When people approve of you, it feels good for a moment. It's like a rush of warmth in the chest, a gentle nod from the world. But the problem with external warmth is that it fades. And when it does, you're left chasing it again. You start editing yourself for applause. You hide your discomfort to keep the peace. You explain your choices because silence feels risky. That's how dependence grows, quietly, politely. Until one day, you realize you've become addicted to being understood. The Stoics would call this the beginning of slavery, because whoever controls your peace owns you. So, they taught a different kind of strength, one that begins with honesty and ends with detachment. You do the right thing, not because it's liked, but because it's right. And when someone disagrees, you don't collapse, you observe, because their judgment reveals their values, not your failure. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily as emperor. He couldn't please the Senate, the soldiers, and the people all at once. So he stopped trying. Instead, he wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own. If you let that sink in, it changes you. It reminds you that peace doesn't require permission, just self-trust. Here's the part that takes real courage. Freedom from approval means being willing to be misunderstood and staying gentle anyway, because silence often triggers people. They'll project motives onto it. They'll say you're distant, arrogant, or cold. But your calm will always look strange to those addicted to chaos. The Stoics knew this too. They called it living according to nature, staying in harmony with reason, not reaction. You don't correct every false perception, because you know truth doesn't need protection. It just needs time. That's what maturity looks like. You don't explain your peace, you embody it. You don't debate your values, you live them. And slowly, the people who used to question you begin to change around you. They stop testing your boundaries, because they can feel that your calm isn't weakness, it's finality. When you reach that place, you stop needing applause. You stop fearing silence. You start breathing differently, deeper, slower, freer. That's what the Stoics meant by inner freedom, the power to remain yourself, even when no one else understands. Detachment isn't withdrawal. It's perspective. It's standing in the middle of life, in relationships, conversations, expectations, and remembering. I am here, but I am not owned by this. It's the power to care deeply without clinging, to love without losing yourself, to speak truth without defending it. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." That bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like walking away without resentment. Sometimes it's saying less, not more. Sometimes it's letting a misunderstanding end a conversation instead of your peace. That's what real discipline looks like. Not the kind that suppresses emotion, but the kind that chooses where to place energy. Wisely, deliberately, calmly. And if you ever forget, remember this: you are not born to be understood by everyone. You were born to understand yourself deeply, and to live from that understanding. So the next time someone misreads you, don't rush to correct them. Smile softly. Let silence do what words never can. Because your peace doesn't need witnesses. It just needs you. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how the Stoics practiced this every day, how they trained their minds, rewired their instincts, and found strength in stillness, even in the loudest moments of life. Freedom isn't something you stumble into. It's something you train for, like a muscle, like breath. Marcus Aurelius didn't just wake up calm. He worked for it every single day. He faced betrayal, politics, chaos, and still managed to hold his center. Because for him, peace wasn't a mood, it was discipline. Marcus began his mornings with reflection, not reaction. before facing the Senate, before hearing a single opinion. He would write in his journal, "Today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, and unsocial." It wasn't pessimism, it was preparation. He didn't want to be surprised by human behavior. He wanted to accept it before it arrived. Because surprise is what turns irritation into anger. Now imagine doing that today. Waking up, not to check your phone or inbox, but to prepare your mind for the inevitable misunderstandings of the day. To remind yourself that someone might misread your tone, question your motives, or take your calm personally, and that none of it can touch your truth. That's Stoic hygiene. You don't wait for a peace to happen. You clean your mind daily to make room for it. Try this before your day begins. Remind yourself, today, someone might not understand me, and that's okay. It sounds small, but it disarms so many invisible battles before they start. The second Stoic practice is what Epictetus called the discipline of assent. It's the art of pausing before agreeing with your own emotions, because not every feeling deserves belief. When you're misunderstood, your body reacts first. Heat in the chest, tension in the jaw, a rush of adrenaline. Your mind starts writing stories. They don't respect me. They don't get me. They're judging me. But Stoicism teaches you to stop right there, to look at the thought before you let it own you. You ask, is this within my control? If the answer is no, you breathe and let it pass. Because the thought isn't the truth. It's just a spark, and every fire begins with one. This practice rewires the brain. It trains you to live on your terms instead of emotions that drive uninvited. The more you pause, the less you explain. Because clarity doesn't come from reacting, it comes from restraint. Seneca wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is often more hurtful than the injury that provokes it. So instead of reacting outward, turn inward." That's where mastery begins. Marcus ended his days the way he began them, with honesty. At night, he reviewed his actions, not to judge himself, but to refine his response for tomorrow. He'd ask, where did I lose my calm? Where did I explain when silence would have been wiser? This wasn't guilt, it was growth. He understood that awareness, not perfection, was the goal. You can do the same. Before bed, reflect on your day. Where did you over-explain? What did it cost you? Energy, time, peace. And how can you reclaim that space tomorrow? This small ritual transforms your life, because you stop drifting through days of noise and start living with purpose, precision, presence. That's what Stoic training really is. Not detachment from life, but attention to a dot. When you do this long enough, something shifts quietly inside. You stop feeling the need to win arguments. You stop needing to be seen as good. You start realizing that understanding yourself is infinitely more satisfying than being understood by others. That's the point where peace becomes natural, not forced. It's when silence feels like strength, not surrender. And once you reach that place, you no longer explain yourself, not because you're better than others, but because you've outgrown the need to be seen. Marcus called that the fortress within, a place no rumor, no judgment, no misunderstanding can reach. That's what you're building now. Every time you pause instead of defend, reflect instead of react, you're laying another stone in that inner fortress. And when it's built, the storms of opinion may still roar outside, but inside, there's stillness. And that stillness, once earned, can never be taken away. In the next part, we'll step back and see the full picture. How everything we've explored connects into one truth. That peace doesn't come from being understood, but from understanding yourself deeply enough that you no longer need to be. When you strip everything away, the titles, the opinions, the noise, what's left? It's you, the unfiltered version, The part that doesn't perform or explain. The part that simply is. That's where Stoic peace begins. Not in changing the world's perception, but in finally seeing yourself clearly. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." We spend so much of life digging outward, searching for approval, understanding, belonging. But the Stoics remind us, the well we're trying to fill is already inside us. We just forgot how to draw from it. So much of the pain that drives us to explain ourselves comes from not trusting what we already know to be true. When someone questions us, we doubt our judgment. When someone misreads us, we question our worth. But once you start seeing your intentions clearly, you realize you don't need people to confirm what's already evident within you. Understanding yourself isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent. You make choices that align with your values, and you stop needing to justify them to anyone who lives by a different compass. That's not arrogance. That's integrity. When your actions match your beliefs, when your words match your heart, you become unshakable. Because you're no longer living two lives, the one people see, and the one you truly feel. Most of the anxiety people feel today doesn't come from doing the wrong thing. It comes from betraying their own truth to appear right. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you want to rest. You explain decisions you've already made, all to maintain peace outside, while chaos brews inside. But the moment you start aligning with yourself, you stop negotiating your peace for a temporary comfort. That's when inner calm becomes automatic, because the person you used to explain yourself to is finally on your side. Seneca wrote, "A man who is at peace with himself cares not for the applause of the crowd." That's the kind of confidence Stoicism builds, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't shout, but radiates. The kind that doesn't need to win, because it's already whole. When you no longer spend your days defending who you are, you free up energy you didn't even know you'd lost. That's when life starts to feel lighter, not because it changed, but because you stopped carrying everyone else's opinions with you. Think about how many invisible weights you carry. The co-worker's judgment, the family member's expectations, the voice in your head saying, "They'll think you're selfish." Every explanation is another brick in that invisible backpack. And over time, it gets heavy. But you can choose to set it down. You do that by practicing stillness, by listening to yourself before you speak, by asking, "Do I need to say this, or am I just afraid of silence?" Most times, the silence already holds your answer. This isn't easy work, but it's the work that transforms you. Because self-knowledge turns fear into clarity, and clarity turns explanation into quiet strength. When you finally understand yourself deeply, you stop swinging with every opinion that passes through your life. You become grounded, not hard, not rigid, but steady. You start speaking less, yet being heard more. You start doing less, yet achieving more peace. That's the paradox of self-understanding. When you stop chasing approvals, the right people start respecting you. Because nothing commands attention more than quiet conviction, and it's not about power over others. It's about power within. The kind that doesn't need to be shown, only felt. That's what Marcus, Seneca, and Epictetus all pointed to. They weren't teaching people how to become untouchable. They were teaching how to become whole. So if you take one thing from this journey, let it be this. You don't owe the world your explanations. You owe yourself your truth. That's the approval that matters, not the one that comes and goes with circumstance, but the one that stays, even in silence. So tonight, when the day quiets down and the noise of others' opinions fades into the background, ask yourself, what do I believe about me, without their voices? And whatever answer comes, hold it close. That's the real you, the one who doesn't need to explain, because they finally understand. In the next part, we'll bring everything together. A final reflection on how to live this truth daily. How to walk through the world steady and kind. So your silence becomes not distance, but presence. Once you've learned to stop over-explaining, you begin to live differently. Not louder, not prouder, just clearer. You move through your day with quiet authority, the kind that doesn't demand attention, because it's already rooted in something deeper. Understanding. This part of the journey is about applying everything we've explored, taking the wisdom of the Stoics from theory to action, and learning how to live in a world that constantly demands your justification, without losing your center. Seneca wrote, "Speech is to be used for the benefit of others, not for our own relief." It's a powerful line, because so often, when we explain ourselves, we're not doing it to inform, but to ease discomfort. We speak to manage someone's reaction, to fill awkward silence, to prove that our intentions were pure. But what if you only spoke when it served truth, not emotion? That's what the Stoics practiced. Measured words, rooted in calm. They knew that every unnecessary explanation was a leak of energy, of dignity, of time. So the next time you feel compelled to justify yourself, pause. Ask, is this for their understanding or my insecurity? If it's the latter, let silence hold the space instead. Silence never betrays you, but words often do. Modern culture often confuses detachment with apathy, but the Stoics saw detachment as love without control. Caring deeply while knowing when to let go. You can love someone and still not explain every decision. You can care for people without carrying their confusion, because your clarity is not their responsibility to understand. When someone misunderstands your intentions, don't rush to fix it. Just stay consistent in your actions. Time will reveal what words never could. Epictetus said, "If someone speaks ill of you, do not defend yourself. Live in such a way that no one believes them." That's real detachment, is strength wrapped in grace. It's not that you don't care what people think. It's that you no longer depend on it to feel secure. Every time you explain yourself to someone who's already made up their mind, you're trying to light a candle in a storm. It doesn't work, and it exhausts you. Energy is sacred. And Stoicism teaches that what you give attention to, you give life to. So, if you constantly explain your peace becomes fragile. But if you simply live it, it becomes unshakable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, that's your guide. Stop explaining your goodness, live it. Stop proving your integrity, embody it. Stop defending your calm, protect it. When your peace becomes consistent, you start radiating something rare, quiet certainty. People feel it before you speak. They notice your stillness in chaos, your clarity in confusion. And though they may not say it, they'll respect it. Because truth always commands quiet respect. At first, living this way might make you feel distant. Friends may say, "You've changed." Colleagues might think you're detached. But what's really happening is transformation, not of how you speak, but of how you exist. You're learning to choose peace over approval, presence over performance, truth over explanation. This shift doesn't make you colder. It makes you real. You begin to love more freely, because you're no longer weighed down by needing to be understood. You start enjoying solitude, because silence no longer feels empty. It feels like home, and one day, you'll notice something simple but profound. The things that once demanded explanations no longer do. People stop questioning your calm, because they sense the strength behind it. You stop explaining your choices, because you're too busy living them. That's when you realize you haven't become someone new. You've just returned to the person you were before the world taught you to justify yourself each morning. Remind yourself, I owe no one an explanation for my peace. Then live as if that sentence were law. Carry yourself with quiet confidence. Act with integrity even when no one's watching. Respond less, observe more. And when misunderstanding comes, because it always will, remember, it's not your job to correct perception, only to stay aligned with truth. Epictetus once said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That's the essence of Stoic living. You don't preach peace, you become it. You don't demand respect, you earn it through consistency. And you don't chase understanding, you stand in it. Because the person who no longer needs to explain is the person who's finally free. In the final part, we'll bring everything home. How to maintain this calm in a noisy, demanding world. And how to make your silence not just protection, but power. When the world feels loud, your instinct might be to shout louder, to prove, to defend, to be heard. But the truth is, peace doesn't survive in noise. It grows in silence, not the silence of withdrawal, but the silence of presence. And when you live this way, your calm becomes louder than any explanation ever could. We live in an age of constant commentary. Everyone has an opinion, and everyone expects yours in return. Social media turns thoughts into performances and mistakes into headlines. It's easy to feel like silence means defeat, but the Stoics would have smiled at this chaos. They would have seen it for what it is, the endless dance of people reacting without reflection. Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the first step to living stoically today. Refuse to be pulled into every argument that passes by. You don't need to correct every false claim or defend yourself to those who've already chosen misunderstanding, because every time you react, you hand over your calm. Every time you argue, you trade clarity for noise. And every time you explain yourself to gain validation, you step away from the fortress of self-trust you've been building. So next time you're tempted to respond, ask yourself, will this make me freer or just louder? Most of the time, silence will do the talking for you. Stoic peace is not passive. It's active restraint, the kind that turns intention into action without broadcasting every step. When you stop explaining yourself, your actions naturally begin to shine through. People start noticing your steadiness, not because you announce it, but because you embody it. They feel the quiet confidence behind your decisions. And even if they don't understand, they can't deny the results. Seneca said, well-being is realized by small steps, but it is truly no small thing. Every day you choose silence over argument, clarity over approval. You're taking those small steps. You're rewriting your instincts. You're building trust, not with others, but with yourself. And that's what radiates outward. When people feel that you no longer seek their validation, they begin to give it, not because you asked, but because your peace commands respect. That's how you win quietly. There is grace in restraint, grace in letting things unfold without forcing them, grace in saying less, doing more, and letting the truth breathe on its own. The world doesn't teach us that kind of grace. It teaches us to rush, to prove, to persuade. But when you truly understand yourself, you realize that truth doesn't need a defense. It just needs consistency. Marcus Aurelius lived this out daily. He faced criticism, betrayal, and endless expectations, but he refused to waste his energy explaining why he stayed calm. He simply continued to act in alignment with his values, and history remembered his steadiness more than his speeches. That's the legacy of stillness. It outlives the noise. So when someone misunderstands you, don't fight to clear your name. Keep living the truth that only time can confirm. The people who matter will notice. The rest were never listening anyway. In a world obsessed with reaction, silence becomes a form of power. Not the power to dominate, but the power to endure, to observe, to choose. When you no longer explain yourself, you send a message: I am at peace with who I am. And that kind of peace is magnetic. People feel it. They trust it. They lean toward it. The irony is, when you stop trying to be understood, you often become more understood than ever before. Because silence gives weight to your presence. It makes people lean in, not tune out. Your calm becomes your language. Your steadiness becomes your influence. And your silence becomes your signature. A mark of self-mastery in a world that screams. Epictetus once told his students, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That's how you end this cycle. Not by fighting to prove yourself, but by living so clearly that proof becomes unnecessary. You no longer waste time rehearsing explanations that no one asked for. You no longer apologize for being misunderstood. You simply live, gently, truthfully, courageously. And through that quiet strength, you become untouchable. Not because the world stopped testing you, but because you stopped seeking its approval. That's the essence of Stoicism. Not emotionless living, but emotional clarity. Not withdrawal, but wisdom. Not pride, but peace. So tonight, when your day ends and the noise finally fades, ask yourself, who am I when I no longer need to explain? Let that question stay with you. Let it guide you tomorrow. In your words, your actions, your pauses, because that version of you, calm, confident, self-contained, is who you've been trying to return to all along. You don't need to prove your peace. You just need to live it. And when you do, the world will feel your silence and call it strength. There's a kind of confidence that doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't show up in perfect words or endless explanations. It's not about charisma or control. It's the quiet kind. The kind that lives in stillness, walks with clarity, and smiles even when misunderstood. That's the kind of confidence Stoicism was meant to create. Not the confidence that shouts, I'm right, but the kind that whispers, I'm enough. In modern culture, confidence is often confused with noise. We're told to speak up, take space, show our worth. But the Stoics remind us, worth doesn't need an audience. It's not something you prove. It's something you embody. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his time, wrote his deepest reflections not for the world, but for himself, in private, in silence. His book, Meditations, wasn't meant to inspire anyone. It was his way of staying honest with himself. And that honesty is what made him immortal. True confidence isn't born from others believing in you. It's born from you no longer needing them to. When you move through the world like that, calm, deliberate, unbothered, people start to notice. Not because you're trying to stand out, but because peace always stands apart from noise. Life will still test you. People will still misunderstand you. There will always be moments where silence feels unfair, where every part of you wants to defend your name, your truth, your side of the story. But when you've built your foundation on inner peace, those moments no longer shake you. They reveal you. Epictetus said, if someone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these. That's humor born from perspective, a deep, calm awareness that you can't control what others think. And once you stop trying, you become free in a way that words can't describe. Because here's the paradox. When you stop defending yourself, the world stops attacking. It's like the energy of resistance disappears, and all that's left is respect. even from those who once misunderstood you. Marcus called it the citadel within, a fortress of peace that no storm can reach. To build it, you don't need wealth or position, you need discipline. You build it through morning reflection, through restraint in anger, through choosing stillness when chaos demands reaction. Each time you pause before defending yourself, you lay another brick. Each time you choose integrity over impression, you strengthen the walls. And soon, your peace becomes impenetrable, not because you've hidden from the world, but because you stopped letting the world invade you. That's what it means to become unshakable, not untouched by life, but unmoved by noise. Here's the part no one tells you. When you master the art of not explaining yourself, your presence begins to carry weight. You become the calm voice in heated rooms, the steady friend people confide in, the one who listens more than they speak, and somehow says the most without saying much at all. People start mirroring your energy. They lower their tone when they speak to you. They begin to think before they react, because your steadiness reminds them what self-control feels like. That's when silence becomes influence, not because you seek to lead, but because inner order always creates outer respect. Seneca said, "He who has peace within himself disturbs neither himself nor another." That's leadership, not through dominance, but through example. To live stoically today isn't about rejecting the world. It's about engaging with it, but on your terms. You can still love deeply. You can still laugh, connect, dream. But you do it with grounded awareness, knowing what's yours to control and what isn't. You stop chasing closure from others because you've already found it within. You stop explaining your worth because your peace already proves it. That's what makes you rare, and that's why your calm will always stand out, not as pride, but as quiet power. So when life tests your patience again, when someone misunderstands your silence or questions your motives, remember this: you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to understand yourself so completely that misunderstanding no longer shakes you. That's when your silence stops being defensive and becomes defining. That's when your restraint becomes your strength. And that's when your calm, steady, still, and unbreakable starts teaching the world without saying a word. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You owe yourself peace, and when you protect that, the world will feel your silence and call it wisdom. We've reached the end of this journey, and if you've listened closely, not just with your ears but with your heart, you've probably felt something shift, quietly, deeply, within you. Because this wasn't just about silence. It was about reclaiming ownership of your peace. It was about remembering that you don't need to explain yourself to live a life that's true, steady, and strong. Let's take a breath and look back. In part 1, you faced the truth of why you over-explain, not because you're weak, but because you've been taught that being understood equals being safe. You saw how that need was born in childhood, and how it quietly shaped the way you move through the world. In part 2, you learned the Stoic insight that misunderstanding is not your enemy. It's a mirror, a reflection of how others see, not who you are. And you realized that peace begins when you stop defending what doesn't need defense. In part 3, you explored the craving for approval and how it steals your freedom one apology at a time. You learned that alignment, living your values without compromise, is worth infinitely more than being liked. In part 4, you saw how the Stoics trained for peace through daily reflection, through the pause before reaction, through the discipline of returning to themselves when the world demanded their energy. In part 5, you learned to understand yourself deeply, because the more you know yourself, the less anyone's misunderstanding can reach you. You learned that self-understanding isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, consistency, and peace. In part 6, you discovered how to live this truth. How to stop explaining and start embodying. How to let silence become your strength and calm become your language. In part 7, you saw the beauty of restraint. How silence speaks louder than words. How peace commands more respect than pride. You learned that silence isn't withdrawal. It's power refined by wisdom. And in part 8, you saw what happens when that peace matures, how it becomes quiet confidence, how it transforms not just you, but everyone around you, how your calm, once misunderstood, becomes something people learn from. That's the Stoic path, not a philosophy to study, but a way of living that teaches through presence. Now, it's time to turn that wisdom inward. Ask yourself, gently, where in my life am I still explaining myself? Is it to someone who doesn't listen? To a past that would let go? To a version of yourself you've already outgrown? You don't need to fight that habit. Just notice it. Awareness is the first act of freedom, and the more aware you become, the easier it gets to let go of the need to be understood. Because here's the truth. People who truly value you don't need explanations. They see your intentions in your actions. They feel your sincerity in your presence. The rest are just background noise. So when the world demands your defense, smile softly. You have nothing to prove. You're already living proof of your own peace. All great philosophies lead to the same place, stillness. Not the stillness of doing nothing, but the stillness of knowing enough. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful than your own soul." That's the destination of this entire journey. Not applause, not approval, but stillness, a state where you know who you are. And that knowledge is enough to keep you steady through any storm. This is the life the Stoics practiced. Not detached, not cold, but deeply alive, deeply aware, deeply calm. And you can practice it too. Not tomorrow, now. In every pause, every breath, every moment you choose peace over performance. You are not defined by how others see you. You are defined by how you respond to being unseen. When you stop explaining, you start embodying. When you stop reacting, you start reflecting. And when you stop seeking approval, you start living in alignment, where peace is your default, not your destination. Remember the timeless Stoic truth. Control what you can, accept what you cannot, and choose your response in between. That's the space where wisdom lives. That's where freedom begins. So, as this video ends, take this with you. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your peace. You don't need to prove you're calm to be respected. You just need to live it. One decision, one pause, one breath at a time. Let your silence become your message. Let your peace become your legacy. Because the loudest truth in this world is the one that doesn't need to be said. If this message resonated with you, take a quiet moment to reflect before doing anything else. And if you'd like more lessons like this, stories, reflections, and timeless wisdom to strengthen your inner calm, subscribe to StoicCraft. Each video here is an invitation to return to yourself, to remember that your peace is your power. Now go live that truth. Speak less, observe more, and let your silence lead. Because in a world that screams for attention, your calm will be the loudest thing in the room.